Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts, and I've decided that I'm going to tackle all of these layouts that I have already planned, but free will isn't nearly as fun. All right, so let's see what the spinner wheel has for us today. It looks like it is 2016 Ebony Kahlua in the pool, which I am super excited about because I have been wanting to scrapbook these photos for quite a while. I pulled out this Hello Summer kit, which is super old from Echo Park. I'm also going to be incorporating some Happy Summer, especially that little brown dog, as well as Fun in the Sun. I also pulled out this 6x6 paper pad 2. This is a sketchbook from Scrapbook Generations, and I'm going to be using Hidden Sketch number 2. I have combined these three collections because the colors are really similar to each other, and I'm kind of just down to scraps, and that's when I love to pull out the 6x6 sketches. You can use the sketches for 6x6 paper pad, but you can also use them for scraps. I'm going to get a total of 13 photos on this layout. I do decide to pull out one flip flap just simply because I had an extra photo, and I'm also going to add a card, which I'm going to do a fun technique to. These are my two puppies that are no longer with us. We got Ebony back in 2004 and Kahlua back in 2006, and they both lived to be 13 years old. So I did have some medical issues with Ebony and had to ultimately send her over the rainbow. And then 2 years later, we had some issues with the back legs of Kahlua and ultimately had to make that same decision. But these photos are from the 4th of July, and I remember hanging out with them in the pool. It was so hot that summer and they were panting like crazy. So we brought out these rubber mats and they just floated around in the pool. It was so much fun. Because there is so much blue in these photos from the water, I decided to pull out some white paint. I used the paint to just add a little bit of edging around all the photos to separate them because I was using a wall of photos. I pulled out this card here that says Hello Summer and decided that I was going to use that as a flip flap. I'm going to have the close-up of Ebony down flat to the layout and then the photo of Kahlua in the flip flap, so when you flip it up, you'll be able to see both of my dogs together. And then for the left-hand side of the layout, I did add the 4x6 as well as two 3x4 photos. I did decide to adhere that photo to the card, but that's going to come up here in just a minute because I'm going to do something really fun to that card. I started to look through all of my scraps to include my 6x6 paper pad because I do own that for one of the collections. And I was just really looking for any of the paper that was bright and sunny, not any blues. I was trying to stay away from that color since I did have a lot of it in my photos. So I have a yellow chevron as well as orange and pink, green, and a striped as well as a circle paper. I knew that polka dotted paper would work perfectly for this layout, so I do have 3 papers that are kind of polka dots. And for my larger chevron piece, I did pull out this paper that has, I think there's some type of florals on it. They are a little bit larger, so I thought that would be a perfect paper to have a little bit larger of a banner strip on it. I counted these papers multiple times, and you will see me count them so many times. I just kept losing track because I was thinking of what papers I could use. I felt like every time I cut a strip, I had to count the papers again. I probably should have kept like a running tally over to the right of me, but in that moment, I was just going to count the papers. I feel like I have finally gotten the amount of papers that I need as well as a configuration that's going to work. So I did pull out this banner punch from Stampin' Up! It will put a banner in 3 different sizes. So I did use that to put a banner on the top and bottom. These papers are 6 inches long, so I am going to hide them behind the photos, which is exactly what the sketch calls for, hidden strips. Some of the papers were just a hair wider than 1 inch, and they do not fit in that banner punch if they are more than 1 inch. So I did have to do some paper shaving so that I could get them to the 1 inch size. And then I continued cutting out the banners. I love using the 6x6 paper pad classes from Scrapbook Generation because I can get so many uses out of my scraps. And this is one of those collections that I've had for quite a while. I've used it several times and I just can't get rid of it because I love the fun, bright colors and I feel like I'm still able to get a lot of layouts out of it. There's just so many scraps. I was video chatting with Nicole when I was creating this layout. I showed her all of the scraps that I have. She said, you definitely need to make a plan for using up all of that paper. So maybe that is something that's coming in the future. For the larger piece, I could not use my banner punch because I don't have a banner punch that large. So I did have to cut that out manually. I'm now going to try to figure out a configuration for these strips. I'm wanting to make sure that none of the colors are close to each other, as well as there's not patterns that are close to each other. I did lay down that larger piece in the orange side, but quickly realized that I was supposed to have it on the other side, which meant that I had to change up a couple of pieces. The sketch does call for 2 of the banners to be over on the right-hand side of the layout, so I made sure to add that as well. And then it also calls for 1 1/4-inch strip that's going to be over on the far left. I realized that I didn't have enough color variation, so I decided to go ahead and pull out this light pink paper and switch out some of the patterns. I felt like I still didn't have enough color contrast, so I decided to pull out another piece of pink paper. This is a little bit darker, and I do believe it is the Basil Bling. Once I got the banners cut out for those 2 pink pieces of paper, I went ahead and added it down, and I really like this color combination. I did struggle with which one I was going to take out, and I ultimately took out the really busy floral paper since I did have the other paper that's a little bit wider that's also a floral. At first I thought that I would trim the paper down just a little bit so that they would be even on the top and bottom, but then decided that I didn't like that look, so I just cut them in half and figured I would just tuck them in and make them whatever size I want. So they are a little bit longer on the top than they are on the bottom. I decided to use my T-square ruler at the bottom of the strips because I wanted to make sure that the strips lined up at the bottom. It didn't really matter if they lined up at the top because they were going to be tucked behind the photos anyway. This layout could have a total different look if you were to stagger these banner strips as well. So I feel like it's one of those things that you can make a small change by staggering the banners and it would make a completely different layout. So once I got all the banners down, I did have to do a little bit of paper shaving just to make sure that the paper lined up with the edge. I was about to start my stitching, but then realized that I needed to add this 1/4-inch strip down. At first I thought I would just cut it in half and add it to the top and bottom, but then I realized that I wanted it to go above each one of the banners, so I decided to go ahead and cut another strip. And it probably didn't matter because that entire piece at the top is going to be covered up. So I absolutely could have just used one piece. But it's only 1/4 of an inch and it's just paper and it's in the layout and it looks amazing in the end. So once I get that banner piece down, I am going to tuck it underneath my photo and then use my X-Acto knife to trim off the excess so that it lays exactly where I wanted it to on the bottom. Then I'm going to pull out my Tim Holtz ruler. This is linked below if you'd like to pick it up. It really helps with making straight lines on your layouts, especially if you're doing things like these banners. I added stitching lines to each one of the banners, and then I pulled out my threads and just color matched the ones that I could. I absolutely did a tone on tone for all of the solid papers or the ones that have the tone on tone, but the ones that have busy patterns to them, I tried to first make sure that I was using a color that maybe I didn't have represented elsewhere, like the blue. And then I also thought about having different shades of color. So I have, with that pink paper, 2 shades of pink, and I actually ended up using a thread in pink, and I have 3 shades of the pink. The same for that red color. I tried to use different shades even if I was using the same color. So each strip has its own color. For the stripe paper over on the far right, I did decide to use white on that one because I felt like that contrasted a lot. So I'm going to pull out my sewing tools, and I do have a Amazon storefront linked below with all of these items if you would like to check them out. I do use a back stitch for each one of these lines. I feel like it provides a clean and simple line for these banner strips. I did slow the video down here so that you could see each one of those stitching lines, and I love the way that this turned out. I feel like it gives it so much contrast, and when you have this many photos on a layout, it's really important that you do have those little touches. When I was stitching, I thought, you know what? It would be really fun to also stitch on this card. So I think that this white stitching on the Hello Summer is just chef kiss, so beautiful. I did have to trim out some of the threads on the back, but then I am ready to go with these smaller 2x2 photos. I thought that they would stand out a little bit more if I did back them on a white cardstock, especially since they're 2x2, so that is a really small size. They were going to be overlapping the other photos, and then there's also still a lot of blue pool water in these photos. I did decide to adhere the photos together before I put the fun foam on it. I felt like it would just make it easier to add the foam and it would be cohesive to both pieces. I then used some liquid adhesive to get those down, and of course adding my stamping block on top of it to weigh it down a little bit. I knew I wanted to incorporate the word dog into my title since obviously these pictures are of my dogs. And I thought that Dog Days of Summer was such a fun title. There was the word summer on one of the sticker sheets, as well as the word days. I think it was actually summer days. This particular sticker sheet did come with an alphabet, and they were all different colors, which I'm not a big fan of, but I was able to pull out the word dog in the blue. And I really wanted to use those little green tile stickers for the word of, but there just wasn't enough of them. So I did pull out my tile stickers, and I was able to find one from Freckled Fawn that's in this orange color that matches the collection pretty well. So I did put the word of up on fun foam, and you guys know that I love mixing and matching the fonts for my titles, and this one is no different. I think with having the word summer as well as the word dog and of up on fun foam, the word days is flat to the layout. It just makes such an eye-catching title up there in the upper left-hand corner. And you can also see that this is where I completely cover up that 1/4 inch strip. I'm going to add a dog next to the word summer, which will cover it up completely. I did have to mess around with this title just a little bit because I wasn't sure how I wanted it to lay out. I knew I wanted it to be stacked a little bit. I also knew that I was going to be adding that dog, so I wanted to make sure I had room for that. So I thought about having the word dog above the word days, but then that wouldn't give me a really nice place to have that dog sticker. So I did decide to move it over to the left. This is the dog piece that I decided to pull out. It's on the chipboard. So I went ahead and added it to my title so that I knew exactly where I could add the word dog. And that is the start of this title cluster. I'm actually going to build that up quite a bit. I first started out with this pretty busy cloud. It has some words on it, but I thought it was too busy. And then I pulled out a cloud that has grids on it, and I definitely knew that I wanted to use that. Of course, I wanted it tucked behind my title, so I had to pull up the word dog to get it down. I also added a little blue cloud and then a sun that's going to be peeking out behind the cloud. I ended up having to take the word dog completely off the layout so that I could get the clouds and the sun down. And I think that the sun peeking out behind the cloud is just such a fun little accent to this title piece. Once I get the sun and clouds down, then I go ahead and add the word dog back. I then thought about adding a little butterfly. I know that that butterfly is definitely not in proportion to the cloud and sun, but I'm just going with it. When I was talking to Nicole, she was like, you have 2 dogs in your photos. You have to have 2 dogs in that title cluster. Luckily, I was able to find another dog. It's actually the same exact dog, but he's looking to the left, which I love when companies do that and they mirror those images. One is a chipboard piece and one is a sticker. So I did decide to put the sticker up on fun foam. So it does make them a little more even. And then in between those 2 dogs, I decided to add a heart as well as 2 little circles that kind of remind me of like a ball, like it's looking like they're kicking the ball back and forth with each other. I see that. Probably no one else is going to see that, and that's okay. I also wanted to add a little bit of a cluster behind the dog, and at first I put that ice cream behind the dog's booty, and when I showed it to Nicole, she was like, absolutely not. you do not want the ice cream behind the dog's booty. So I did move it up to the top, and she was like, I am okay with it coming out of its head, but not out of his butt. So I finally finished up that cluster with a little arrow as well as a little heart. For the 4x6 card, I felt like it just needed something else. I did have the butterfly over to the far left, and I thought maybe adding a butterfly to it would work. I really liked that heart, but it was way too big. And I just felt like the butterfly was getting lost, but I was like, it is what it is. I'm just going to go with it for right now. Then I started to work over on the far left-hand cluster, and I wanted to add a butterfly there, but the only butterfly that was left was an orange one, and I wanted to put it on the orange paper. So I ended up switching out the orange butterfly for the red butterfly. I did decide to put the butterfly's body flat to the layout, and then I did put some fun foam behind the butterfly so that it looks like he is flying. And then I also found this little swirl, and I thought that that would be cool to have like a flowing part of the butterfly, like his flight passage. I really like this flower, but it just doesn't end up making it to that section. I actually ended up adding it to another section of the layout. I am all over the place with these clusters. Over up on the top right-hand side, I just added a really tiny cluster. I have a tag that says happy, as well as a red heart and a yellow arrow. I was trying to bring some cohesiveness to my clusters by adding some of the similar pieces. So in each one of my clusters, you're going to see an arrow as well as a heart. And then for some of the clusters, I do have the butterflies, which does bring the clusters together. I also decided to add the word splash down at the bottom. Even though there's not really a whole lot of splashing going on in these photos, I felt like it worked well for pool photos. Then I added that little flower up to the top that I was telling you I tried down at the bottom, and I just tucked it behind the word summer. I really liked this tag that says happy day, and that is going to be my cluster starter over on the far right hand side. I added a pink arrow to that, as well as a little pinwheel and a little pink heart. So for these clusters over on the right, I didn't make them really large because I did want my photos to be a focal point. But I knew that I needed something to break up all of the water. I realized that my photo and the 4x6 card wasn't stuck together very well, especially since there was all of that stitching. So I did add some additional adhesive to it. I thought about adding a couple more stickers to it, but ultimately I just stuck with the butterfly. I then pulled out the brads. I was able to find one brad that has a little butterfly, so I added that over on the far left-hand side. And then on the title cluster, I found a little floral that matches the floral that's in the bigger banner strip, and so I added that right above the word summer. And I struggled a little bit with these brads. I then pulled out my color boxes, and I have one that has like clear pieces in it, so I added those around. I also pulled out my color boxes in blue and pink, and I decided that I was just going to use the gemstone ones, and I feel like that really adds to the water vibe or summer vibe with those jewel tones. I do have a playlist listed below of all of my pool, water slide, water park adventures. So if you want to check out more videos for your pool inspiration, make sure you check out that playlist. And then that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. I'm so excited that the spinner wheel chose this layout because I have been wanting to complete this layout for a while and I just have not gotten myself into it. If you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.